Now we're going to begin our more in-depth look at developing the forces, goals, and objectives for your campaign. Just about any view out of an airplane window can show you how complicated it is to manage all the potential sources of water pollution in the landscape. Runoff is coming from so many different land uses, carrying a variety of potential pollutants along with it. Much of the land surface is covered with paving or buildings, generating larger volumes of erosive runoff. And stream channels are altered and straightened to make way for the development, furthering bank erosion. The situation can almost seem overwhelming as you consider the breadth of businesses and communities in a watershed. But as with all problems, you have to take a step back and break down the situation into smaller, more manageable parts. By tackling watershed management in a more strategic, thoughtful way, we may just be able to help inform and motivate its residents to help us achieve cleaner, healthier water resources. As discussed in the overview, we really do need a plan for outreach. Here are some reasons why. It can help with organization building, especially if it involves diverse members of the group. You can develop a shared sense of purpose and provide your program or activity with clarity. It can help excite and motivate a range of partners and maximize your organization's performance. It also sets the foundation for your future efforts and can help form your organization's reputation. In step 1, we're going to cover 3 major items: identifying your driving forces, developing the related goals, and assigning the objectives to achieve those goals. Most watershed outreach campaigns are driven by a problem, such as those on this slide. By identifying the forces that are compelling the need for an outreach campaign and exploring their connections to water quality and quality of life issues, you'll be better able to define the focus and the related goals of the campaign. When considering an outreach campaign, you first need to articulate why you need one. These are your driving forces. They help to explain why you decided to start meeting, discussing, and taking the initiative. So what's your motivation? Once you know your underlying driving force, you can set the goals and objectives that are needed, which will in turn guide your process of informing and engaging those who are potentially contributing to the water quality problem and hopefully motivate them to alter their behaviors in ways that can help. As an example, let's consider a popular Kentucky reservoir that consistently shows very high levels of algae productivity in the late summer or early fall. Some of these are suspected of being of the blue-green variety that may produce toxins that are harmful to humans and other animals. And it's believed that some of these high nutrient concentrations are coming from one of the lake's major tributaries. This lake is also used as a drinking water supply for most residents in the area, which is of added concern. In addition to providing opportunities for boating, swimming, and fishing, many people have purchased homes around the lake for its scenic qualities. So the increased algal blooms are the driving force in this example. Along the way, you may discover other interests and issues, but it's important to keep the main motivating force in focus. Now let's move on to the goals. These are general statements that express the broad focus of your efforts. How are we going to address the driving force? Some examples of goals may be characterizing and resolving an existing problem, such as flooding or water quality violations, protecting an important recreational or habitat resource, developing a shared community vision of improvement, and evaluating a project's implementation success. Your goals can be developed at any time in the planning process, and they may change along the way as you adapt to the growing movement and new information. And sometimes you might have to take a step back and adjust if your stakeholder support changes or if partnerships change. So going back to our example, let's look at some of the goals that you could formulate about the lake situation. One, you could form a group of stakeholders to address the algal blooms. 2, you could identify potential nutrient sources to the reservoir. Goal 3 is to develop an awareness campaign to help inform the community about the problems, causes, and solutions to the algal blooms. And Goal 4 is then to encourage actions that can reduce the algal problem. To make your goals achievable, you'll now need more specific objectives. You're probably going to need several for each goal. You need to keep the desired outcome in mind and keep them as specific as possible with a time element, and also be mindful of the future need for evaluation and refinement of your plan. The acronym SMART helps to define what makes a good objective. We mentioned specific. Objectives should help you narrow down what you are seeking to accomplish. They should be simple and sensible. They should also be measurable. You'll need to be able to measure your progress, so they should include factors such as how much and how many. They should also be achievable. An objective should not be visionary or overly ambitious, which can actually hinder progress, but it should be something that can be realistically accomplished. They should be relevant and match the context of your overall plan, and they should be time-focused with due dates or specific milestones for accomplishing steps towards your goal. Keep an eye on your deliverables as you develop your objectives. What specifically are going to be your outcomes? As you progress through your outreach campaign, your objectives and activities will likely change. Once the target audience becomes more aware of the issues, you can really then focus more of your efforts toward action. So goals will change, resulting in changes in objectives and activities along the way. Continuing with our example, here are some objectives associated with Goal 1, to form a group. In the next 2 months, identify 3 key stakeholder groups affected by the algal blooms. Some possibilities could be marina owners, the drinking water plant operators, lakeside homeowners, or the boating and fishing enthusiasts that use the lake. Objective 2, within 3 months, convene a stakeholder meeting to discuss the issue, at which you'll invite those stakeholders identified in Objective 1. And then for the third objective, garner commitment from 2 of those stakeholder groups to help you with a campaign effort within the next 6 months. It's worth noting that there may be some overlap between objectives and the behaviors that you're hoping to influence. When forming your objectives, try to distinguish them from the discrete behaviors that you needed. Here are the differences. Objectives are your SMART ways to achieve your goals, but the behaviors are the behaviors, tasks, or actions that must be achieved or performed in order to accomplish the objectives. Later, we'll be brainstorming possible behaviors to achieve your objectives. Here's our example with an objective and some related behaviors. In this objective, we want to reduce nutrient runoff from the residential areas around the lake by 10% over the next 5 years. Under that, we have some of the behaviors that would help us achieve that objective, such as picking up pet waste, reducing fertilizer applications, planting streamside vegetation, and having your septic systems pumped out. Now you can start using your building blocks worksheet to help you think through your own driving force goals and objectives. When developing your objectives, it might be helpful to think through some of the questions that are highlighted in yellow on this slide. You might also want to begin to prioritize your objectives and the sequences of how they can be carried out. Later, since we'll be discussing ways to evaluate your outreach campaign, you might want to start building in ways to assess each step of your process. This will help you adjust and stay on track to meeting your goals. Now that you've taken some time to think through your force, goals, and objectives, here are some of the questions you might consider when refining your list of related behaviors to promote. What might have the greatest water quality benefits or help you reduce pollutants the most easily? What behavior is most likely to be accepted and sustainable? What's easiest to show a direct link to the actual problem at hand? Or what's most affordable to promote or affordable to adopt? Later, after we've selected our target audience, we'll rank these proposed behaviors to make your final selections. Many of you are probably already familiar with an approach called community-based social marketing. This is an approach to enabling sustainable behavior through direct understanding and contact with people at the community level. Doug Mackenzie Moore has pioneered the use of this approach to sustainable behavior change and has a book about it that's available freely online called Fostering Sustainable Behavior: An Introduction to Community-Based Social Marketing, which is a great resource. Social marketing helps ensure that your approach is based on an understanding of people's daily lives so that it's more realistic and achievable. It helps you ask questions like, do I really understand my target audience and see things from their perspective? Am I clear about what I want my target audience to do? For the target audience, do the benefits of doing what I would like them to do outweigh the cost or barriers to doing it? And am I using a combination of activities or approaches in order to encourage people to achieve the desired action? The goal of social marketing is always to change or maintain how people behave, not what they think or how aware they are about an issue. If your goal is only to increase awareness or knowledge or change attitudes, you're not actually doing social marketing. It also helps you target your resources in a cost-effective way and selects ways to advocate for changes that are likely to have the greatest long-term impact. Pennsylvania State University developed a great resource called Your Quick Guide to Community-Based Social Marketing. This slide summarizes some of the content of that resource and shows the 5 steps they recommend for the social marketing approach to changing behaviors. The first is obviously to select the behavior to change. This behavior should be indivisible or discrete and achieve your desired end state. The second step is to identify the barriers and benefits associated with the behavior. These specifically mean those that are perceived or actual by your target audience. And barriers actually inhibit the behavior while the benefits encourage it. You can use research, observation, small focus groups from within your audience, or surveys to help get out this information. The third step is to develop your strategy. You can focus your approach on different considerations, such as getting commitment to one particular action. This can lead to greater behavioral change when you make a commitment, maybe through a verbal, written, or a public or group pledge. You can also get at your behavior change through social norms. Individuals tend to adopt behaviors from other people. You can use signage to convey the desirable action in a positive way, such as a picture of a person picking up pet waste. You could also go about it through social diffusion. This increases the visibility of the behavior adoption with stickers, signage, or recognition listings. Prompts can be used. These are noticeable, self-explanatory reminders to engage in the behavior and should be located as closely as possible to the targeted behavior. Communication through messages that are vivid, personal, and concrete, as well as easy to remember and delivered from a credible source. You can use incentives to help encourage people to conduct the behavior that they might not otherwise do. These should be presented when the behavior should occur. It is noted that you should be a little bit cautious with this approach because when you remove the incentives, it may in turn reduce the motivation. And then you can also focus on convenience. You want to make the sustainable action less time-consuming or burdensome than the alternative behavior. Then you'll want to pilot your strategy to work out any issues before committing to its broader use. And then finally, in step 5, you implement your strategy with the entire targeted audience. You'll want to note participation levels prior to your marketing efforts so you can make comparisons afterward and then promote your progress and help encourage continued adoption of the targeted behavior. Here's an example of a matrix that a group used to determine the most effective ways to help reduce nutrient runoff from residential areas. This committee used its research to rate different behaviors based on various considerations, with 1 being least likely and 6 being most likely. You'll see on the left-hand column that some of the considered behaviors included picking up pet waste, reducing fertilizer application, planting streamside vegetation, and having septic systems pumped out. The questions related to each behavior across the top row were things like which behavior will result in the highest reduction in pollution, which will be the most affordable to promote, which will be the most affordable to adopt, and so on. It was determined that reducing fertilizer applications to once a year instead of twice a year would be the more likely and effective measure to encourage. For now, we're just going to focus on identifying some potential behaviors that can address your objective. We really won't be ready to score these behaviors until we've done that target audience assessment, but this gives you an idea of the complete process. In the example on the previous slide, the group sought to reduce fertilizer applications to once a year. And here's the message that they settled on. Fertilize in the fall, that's all. It's simple and memorable. Studies show that positive messages like this one tend to be more effective at changing people's habits than negative ones. Do this instead of don't do this. Now we're going to move on to our activity of brainstorming behaviors to go along with at least one of your objectives. We're going to work in breakout groups to help give each other feedback, and then we'll come back together to share some questions and observations about our process.